They're only as good as the people who stand on them. And the truth is if this paper doesn't stand, well, then we truly don't have a law in this land. Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is if we don't stand up for conscience sake and our right to assemble and our right for free speech and to gather, these are all essential rights and freedoms. And people are saying that we don't care when we're standing up. And that's their opinion. And the beautiful thing about the Charter is everybody can have an opinion. Okay, whether your opinion's different than my opinion, and that's okay. For those of you that listen to this, I want you to know that I'm okay with you having an opinion. And it can be very different from my opinion. But at the end of the day, we're fighting for the very same thing. And we want you to know that when we fight for our rights to stand for these things, we're also fighting for your rights. And that's a beautiful thing.
Sheila Gunn Reid for Rebel News in Edmonton. It's New Year's Eve. We're still working hard fighting for freedom, and so are the pastors at Church in the Vine Church here in Edmonton. I'm with Associate Pastor Rodney Fortin and Blair Clinton. I finally got that right. Gentlemen, you are keeping your church open during the pandemic, and you have been harassed, I guess is the right word, by AHS.
Yeah, we've over the last four or 5 weeks, we've had AHS come out at least 3 times, and they're checking out our church and making sure we're following protocols. And of course, our heart is to keep our people safe, and we want to practice safe protocols. We don't want to be part of the cause, but we want to be part of the solution. But in the same breath, we also want to say that we love people and we love our church. And we want to make sure that our church can meet, can gather. And I believe that we have a substantiative right to gather according to the Charter of Rights and Freedoms of our country.
That's interesting. I've never been to a church that has the Charter of Rights and Freedoms on the wall. But boy, I love seeing it. So for people to come into the church, do they have to pre-register? Do you turn people away if you're increasing capacity? What's the protocol?
Well, I believe that the whole idea of pre-registration is really going against what we know is just the Privacy Act. People have a right to come and go as they please. And because we're not encouraging people that are sick to come, we're believing that the people that are coming are healthy and they have the right to come to church without feeling that they're being watched by Big Brother.
Now, you are working with the Justice Center for Constitutional Freedoms. I think you're in very good hands there. What are they doing to help you?
Well, they're helping us formulate some of the things that we're supposed to say, some of the responses that we're supposed to have, because it's a tricky way to navigate out there today. Some of the things that we're having to say to people, you can get caught up in your own language very easily. And so we're trying to be careful there. We don't want to give the wrong impression out into the community. But at the same time, we really have to cover ourselves in this day. The left-leaning media is really hammering churches like we saw yesterday with one of the interviews that was done with us. And actually even one of the interviews that was done by the CBC that we never even did the interview. They took our information and they put it online, and they took a picture that was taken back in November, the beginning of November. And they took that and they used it as a picture that was for our Christmas service. And it was like over a month later and totally different context, but it's false. And so it's really important that the truth gets out. And so the Justice Center for Freedoms is giving us some talking points, some things that we're supposed to say and to encourage us along the way. So
I think it's a shame really that our faith leaders in this day and age have to become sort of pseudo lawyers. You have to know the law, and you have to be sort of pseudo health practitioners. When I think what you do best is, direct people in their faith journey. Is that a struggle?
No, we're actually, the church is actually growing. We feel that the people are responding to the message of the gospel. Really, that's what we're here to do. It's preaching the word of God. But in the midst of it, we're finding that we have to kind of all of a sudden address these political points, hot points in our culture today. And I hate to say it, but COVID's become very political. And so we've had to address that. And fundamentally, we have the right to gather. If you go back to May, and I think this is where it all started, you know, when we thought that there was COVID, and COVID was a huge problem, they had modeling. And as you know, those models really didn't pan out. And so because of that, we decided, hey, because those models aren't correct, why are the churches not able to go beyond 15 people? So at that time, we were restricted to just 15 people. So we closed our doors because our worship team is like 6 people. So, you know, you put in your sound booth and the people helping us to do live streams, that's your 15. And so all of a sudden we realized, okay, that's happening. And then they opened up the restaurants. And they said, you know what, the restaurants can operate, the marijuana stores can continue to operate, the liquor stores can continue. And all of a sudden this whole thing called, what was the word I'm looking for? Whether or not you're an essential service, the essential service thing. Yeah. And this is when, as pastors, and not just us, but others within the Christian community, began to say, well, wait a second, the church is essential. And so our pushback wasn't really pushing back because constitutionally we have a right to come together. And we see it in the Constitution. In fact, I believe the very first words in the Constitution says what?
Yeah, it's based on the supremacy of God and the rule of law. Yeah.
And so we felt we were on the right side. And so that's where it all really started. And to this day, we feel that Albertans have a right to make a choice. And so we know that some are opposed to masks, some are not, and that's fine. And some are actually, like myself, you know, we are mask exempt. And so, you know, well, why are you exempt? Well, I don't even have a right to ask you why. So when people come to the church and they're given a choice, we have masks. Folks, we have masks for you. Please take one, unless you're mask exempt. And so we're about 60-40 in the church right now. So in other words, I'm not sure. I've been gone for 4 weeks on a mission in Panama, but I think we're running about 60-40.
I would say about 60-40 as well, yeah.
For or against the mask?
Against.
Against. So we have a lot of people that are exempt, okay? Now, it's not my job to enforce it. We don't have mask police here.
Right.
Okay. Same thing with social distancing. We have our carpets marked, tables are set aside, but it's kind of like in Costco. I was sharing this with Pastor Rodney today. You know, if you go to Costco, once in a while, probably every time you go there, you're going to see a couple carts that are really close together and people talking. Okay, so they're breaking the social distance protocol. Okay, but people aren't freaking out there. But here, if you have a family that's a little bit too close, AHS is right there, marking that down, people talking too closely, and that becomes an issue. And so, again, this whole idea of being bullied, we feel they're coming in here and pushing their mandate, okay, and their narrative, where they're not doing it in other places. And so there seems to be a discrimination here. Same thing with restaurants, right? Again, I want to bring that up because, man, that's just a bone of contention. The restaurants were allowed to have 6 people from different families sitting, sharing a pizza. But I couldn't have 2 or 3 couples come together and share communion, the Lord's Supper together. Okay? Now you tell me that's not arbitrary. So those things have been really awkward. Now, of course, we don't break bread here. We have individual, these little servings, they're individual and packaged, everything's sanitary. Again, we're trying to comply. We're doing everything within our power to comply to the Alberta Health Services recommendations and requirements in this church. And yet somehow they're trying to make it sound like we are lawbreakers and that our citizens here, they're basically saying the ones that are saying they're mask exempt are not. Yeah. And how do they know that? They say they are. Now, for them to ask, I don't think they can even ask why. So the point is why are we being singled out? That's the question. And so, this is a pushback against AHS. They have no right to do it because if you were to go around and see what we've done here, you're going to see that we are in complete compliance.
You know, I did see that. I saw signs all over the place. I saw hand sanitizer. I saw masks. You have the tongs to give out the masks. And it's funny that you bring up Costco because you are literally right across the street from a Costco. Yes. It's New Year's Eve. Everybody's over there buying their crab legs. And that store is packed.
Yes.
It's packed. And yet you have to operate at 15% of capacity. And if you want to host a funeral, it's only 10 people. I mean, it's
Crazy.
Now, I think we need to also, if we are guilty, it would be the capacity. It's very difficult for us as pastors to turn anybody away from the church. And so there's been a few services where we've gone a little bit over that. But again, arbitrary rules to this is so ridiculous. We have 10,000 square feet of space that can be utilized by people. Can you imagine? And we're spacing them accordingly. Can you imagine? Go across the street, 600 parking stalls, yesterday and today, packed. No lineups. Where are those people? They're in Costco. They're shoulder to shoulder. They don't have any social distancing protocols in place that we see in operation there. And yet here in the church, we're being restricted. So is there some discriminatory things taking place? Absolutely. And I don't think wouldn't agree that that's happening.
I agree with you. And just to say that, they're crowded into retail space, I'm pro-business. I want the businesses to be open. Yes. I want everybody to conduct their lives normally, weigh the risks, wear a mask if you want, don't wear a mask if you don't want. But I also want those things for the churches too.
Yeah, a couple things that was brought up was the idea that we're lawbreakers. The truth is if we go by the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, which is the law of the land, it's the ultimate law. It starts from the supremacy of God and the rule of law. So really, essentially, God is essentially the highest law in the land. So, and then below that, we have the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And in the Charter of Rights and Freedoms, I have it here. It's just the idea of we have several things that we can actually do. It says everyone has the following fundamental freedoms: freedom of conscience and religion, freedom of thought, belief, opinion, and expression, including the freedom of the press and all other media of communication, freedom of peaceful assembly, and freedom of association. These are valuable things, and they're only as good as the people who stand on them. And the truth is if this paper doesn't stand, well, then we truly don't have a law in this land. Because at the end of the day, the truth of the matter is if we don't stand up for conscience sake and our right to assemble and our right for free speech and to gather, these are all essential rights and freedoms. And people are saying that we don't care when we're standing up, and that's their opinion. And the beautiful thing about the Charter is everybody can have an opinion. Okay, whether your opinion's different than my opinion, and that's okay. For those of you that listen to this, I want you to know that I'm okay with you having an opinion. And it can be very different from my opinion. But at the end of the day, we're fighting for the very same thing. And we want you to know that when we fight for our rights to stand for these things, we're also fighting for your rights. And that's a beautiful thing. And I think another thing is the idea that we don't care as a church, because we're putting people in harm's way. But that's not true. Because the truth of the matter is we love people. And we look at our city and we see our city under the canopy of depression, and people are frustrated and angry, and we see all that. And to have the church closed during this time eliminates the opportunity for people to come in and take advantage of those vital services, to be prayed for, to be loved on, to worship, to cast their cares upon the Lord, for the Lord cares for them. These are all things that we have to really consider. I don't believe the church needs to be closed now. I don't believe it needs to be limited right now. In fact, we need to be deemed essential. We need to become a safe haven for this world. When laws are being made without Parliament, without debating it, without considering the ramifications that they're going to have on society. Well, things are happening right now that are just wrong, and we need to make people aware of that as well. There's an indoctrination of the media out there right now, and the media isn't putting things properly. The facts aren't being laid out properly. And if you withhold a fact from somebody and don't give them the entire scenario, what ends up happening is they're going away with partial information. And that's not right. We need the facts laid out, and I would challenge media resources out there to really speak facts and stop lying to the people.
It seems like there's something nefarious going on here. And I think people already have kind of figured that out, that the numbers just don't make sense. And this is what's not being broadcasted or spoken. The narrative is not that. The narrative is fear. But God has not given us that spirit of fear, but a power and a love and a sound mind. And that's what people need today. They need hope. They need something to go into that gives them that hope. And that's why what you're saying is so true. The church is very, very essential in this hour.
Now, what specifically is the order that AHS has?
Go for it.
No, you go, please.
All right, to the executive order, it says that the owner immediately undertake and diligently pursue the completion of the following work in and about the above noted premises, namely, to ensure that all persons, including but not limited to churches' attendees, staff, volunteers, and performers, wear a face mask or face covering that covers their nose, mouth, and chin at all times while inside the premises, unless they are legally mask exempt, as per Order 4220, which is interesting because that's what our mask exemption is. And when they criticized us about this, they were criticizing our process to identify people with mask exemption because we wanted to make sure that when they come into the building, they see that the people that are mask exempt by the stickers that we place on them and those that are wearing masks. So just to identify those. It also says to ensure that physical distancing at least 2 meters between households is strictly adhered to at all times. And we have all over our house, we have tables set apart 2 meters. We have all of the serving areas set apart 2 meters. On the stage, we have our worshipers set apart 2 meters. And we have actually, I think it's 16 feet from the first worshiper to any person out in the worship team. But here's what they want to do. They want to make sure that our worshipers are singing with masks on, even though it won't even travel that far. So that doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Ensuring that those singing and playing musical instruments are wearing face masks and are spaced apart to allow for physical distancing 2 meters, which we have. If this is not possible, live singing and the use of instruments must cease. You know what? The very command of God, the Bible says, let everything that has breath praise the Lord. We have a commandment of God to get together, to gather. It says no one should forsake the gathering of believers. We have that responsibility before God. We have our church. You think about people, for example, we need one another. No man is an island. We're called to encourage one another daily, all the more while we see the day approaching. How are you going to do that when you're not meeting together, you're not fellowshipping, loving on one another? This is necessary. This is what the church is. And so you're trying to encourage us to be somebody we're not. Now, if it comes down to it, at the end of the day, we choose to obey God. And one of the things that God has told us to do, he says, I want you to gather. I want you to sing. I want you to have communion. I want you to fellowship. I want you to be my light in the world. And I have to tell you, that's all we're trying to do is honor the Lord in our life. They put the orders on the Alberta website to shame everybody, because that's really what they're doing, is they're shaming. It's a public shaming of churches that they feel haven't complied fully with their health order. But the truth of the matter is like people make their own judgments in this day. They're saying, and then they come up with all kinds of threats and everything that come afterwards. I mean, last night we got a phone call at home and somebody phoned us and threatened us and started swearing and cursing at us. And I mean, I didn't finish listening to the call. And even before the call was finished, I already chose in my heart to forgive them, because the reality is they don't know what they're saying. They're just going on the propaganda that's being laid out there by the mainstream news. But I mean, and also if they paint us as dissidents in a sense, like people that are non-compliant in society, I mean, what is the picture that the world is going to get toward the church? And I feel like that's defamation. And I feel like that's really a slanderous thing without necessarily saying the words to slander. They're doing that by putting out that negative picture to the community. But the community is not seeing the rest of what we're doing in here, that makes it legitimate.
I will ask you, and then I'll ask you one final question. Do you have a message for the government?
Message for the government. Well, you know what? If I could encourage the government of Alberta, I'd ask them to take a step back. First of all, to realize how essential the church really is. The church is so essential these days. The world needs the light in the in the community. And the church offers that light. We offer peace. We offer hope. We feed people. We help them with their bills, those that can't make it today. We help a lot of people. And what you're doing is, the government, I want to encourage you, you're tying our hands and you're hindering us from doing something that's actually helping the people. And we're just asking you to really consider, take the tie off, allow the people to come in and get free and to feel like they can get hope restored. You know, take the cap of 15% off of the church so that we can function again.
And I wanted to ask you if you had a message for other Christian communities or other faith communities, I suppose, who are either facing these sorts of orders from the government or who could be sort of consumed by that spirit of fear that we are not called to have.
Well, it's kind of like what we believe is going to be our stand for the church this year is Isaiah chapter 61 and 2. Arise and shine, for your light has come, and the glory of the Lord is risen upon you. We want to challenge all the faith leaders. And sometimes I think we think by turning another cheek and just being meek and quiet, be good little sheep, that we're actually taking a stand. But the truth is we're not. We have to be the light. We are the light of the world. Jesus said, you are the light of the world now. He was the light, and in him was the light of all men. But now we represent his goodness in the earth. If you keep us quiet, if you keep the churches quiet, leaders, let me say this to you. If you're out there, I want you to be encouraged right now. God will be with you. Take a stand in this hour. The Lord is there for you. And I'd love to see all the churches. You know, if we had all the churches take the stand as we're taking, okay, and allowing people to exercise their freedom and their rights in this nation in a very, very, very healthy way, okay, complying to these laws that they're putting into place. But if every single church said, you know what, we're going to go for it. We're going to go for it. You know what would be different? It would be different in this city, in this province, and in this nation if the churches Jesus Christ would actually rise up right now. Rise up, Alberta. That's what we would say.
Good.
Gentlemen, I want to thank you so much for taking the time today. And I want to let everybody at home know that if you are willing to take the same stand as the gentleman here, if you're a business, if you're a church, do reach out to us at a special website we have, iwillopen.com. I'll tell your story. And if you do get a fine because you choose to open your church doors and your church pews to worshipers, if you choose to open your business to customers, if you really have no other option left, if you know the option is take a fine or close your doors forever, reach out to us at a special website. It's at fightthefines.com. For Rebel News here at Church in the Vine in Edmonton, I'm Sheila Gunn Reid. If you're a small business owner and you plan to reopen your doors to your customers, despite the threat of government fines due to this government pandemic lockdown, reach out to us at iwillopen.com and we'll tell your story.